want to get into how you overcame it, your story, how bad it got. And then I want to talk about, we can even turn this into a live case study, dude. I would love to break down how men get addicted, how they stay addicted, and how it holds them back. Mm-hmm. So, dude, I'm pumped for this episode.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. And that was incredibly insightful by your parents, right? Because the average age of exposure is 8 to 11 years old. So for them to know that early on, and I'm stoked to be here, man, because we're speaking to really the first generation that grew up in the technology, smartphone, internet era. And I always talk about the drug of internet pornography being a completely new drug. We have maybe 20, 25 years of it being as accessible as it is. And, it's just been really recently, in maybe the last 5 to 6 years, that this conversation is being had. I saw pornography at 6 years old. I'm 41 today. So 6 years old, the internet wasn't around, so I stumbled across a magazine. I could only imagine how dark and deep things would have gotten if at 11 years old, I had a smartphone with internet porn use. I was lucky I didn't get access to that stuff until I was already in my 20s. So brain was way more developed at that point. So it probably could have been a lot worse for me if I was in Gen Z. So I'm excited to, to speak here today and hopefully help these guys that are out there.
Dude, 100%. And I thank God, that I grew up in a Christian family. I accepted Jesus at 3 years old. Wow. On Halloween actually.
Wow.
Yeah. My I don't know. Just I was 3 years old. I've always felt the presence of God. Always been. I fell away a little bit, but it wasn't long. It was like 6 months, dude. I could only go like 6 months. I was like, dude, this world's dark. And so, I always wanted to live in alignment with God's plan because I knew it was right. And so, I think it'll be interesting because I saw a lot of friends that struggled with it when I was in middle school and high school. And I think, by the grace of God, I didn't really until I was like out of the house, like 18. And so I think a lot of these guys, it just seemed like there was like an aura of darkness that I just didn't quite understand.
Yeah.
And so what's your story with it?
Yeah. I mean, so, like I mentioned, I was 6 years old, and I was snooping around dad's sock drawer and, I lifted some underwear up and, there was these magazines, no clue what it was, no clue what it meant, female body was incredibly interesting to a 6-year-old's mind at that point. But as I've kind of been down this healing journey for myself over the last 5-6 years, like I had to go back to that point and realize like, what did that actually do to me? Like, what did that do to a 6-year-old's brain? And I think two things that I've been able to really get clear on. The first thing is it taught me that secrets were okay in our family. Here's my dad that was hiding something from all of us and probably hiding it from my mom. And then, the female body is amazing and I'm highly curious about it. Not having a lot of access to pornography as a kid, we had to steal it from our parents. Maybe a kid at school would steal one from his dad. We'd leave it at the fort, out in the woods, or, if we were lucky enough, we'd be able to steal one from 7-Eleven. I mean, imagine walking into a 7-Eleven today and there'd be a wall of magazines and behind a black sheet, you could lift the sheet up and see a Hustler magazine. Like that was the era that I grew up in. Not every 7-Eleven, but in certain neighborhoods, you could literally walk in and one of your friends would distract the attendant while the other one put one in his book bag. So it taught a lot of these behaviors that I was able to look back as a grown man and see were very clear, addictive type of behaviors, right? Stealing, lying, hiding things. And then fast forward, when I think it really became a problem was in my early 20s. This is the kind of dawn of the internet era that we have today. I was working in the wireless industry in my early 20s, selling Motorola razors and Blackberries. And for the Generation Z out there, the Blackberry was like the first smartphone that had full color screen. It was the iPhone before the iPhone. I mean, I literally remember the BlackBerry Pearl was the first one that had a fully colored, digitized screen where you could access streaming internet. And being a traveling sales manager at the time, I spent a lot of time on the road and a lot of time in malls. And not thinking about it at the time, porn was something that was kind of normalized. Dad did it. All the kids in school did it. There was no talks of pornography addiction. There was no talks of the danger. I would catch myself taking porn breaks like a person would take a smoke break. So instead of going outside the building to smoke a cigarette, I would find a large private public restroom in the middle of my workday, would sit there and watch porn and masturbate. And I didn't think about it as being a real problem, probably till I got maybe into my mid to late 20s and it started affecting relationships. You know, girlfriends that I was having at the time would see it. They would, you know, what are you looking at? What's this? And I was like, it's just porn. Doesn't everybody do that? And when it started to really affect my relationships is when I started to hide it even more. So through my 30s, you know, I'm highly addictive, not thinking about it as a problem. Still, the thinking of it as a problem didn't really happen until I was probably 34, 35. But it got probably at its worst between 33 and 35. So this was 2015, 2014 to maybe 2017, 2018. At the time, I was running a home-based ticket brokerage, so entrepreneur, solopreneur, a lot of free time, doing pretty well financially. And I would just, for days, you know, for hours throughout the day, I'd work in the morning, go to the gym, and then just watch 4, 5, 6, 7 hours of porn. I was in a relationship in my early 30s. She moved in, and that's when it became a real big problem. Because by this point, I was no longer open about talking about it. Like, I was hiding everything. I used to have a separate laptop, and it stayed in my closet because I've been caught so many times before that I was like, okay, well, this is going to be my porn laptop. It only comes out when I'm alone. I share this story a lot. Like this, once again, not looking at it as a problem at the time, but when I was living with this woman, we had a 2-bedroom townhouse, and I can remember, like, looking back, like every time she'd leave the house, I'd stand up at the 2nd story window and watch her car go down the street. And the minute it turned off of our street, I'd run downstairs, lock the door, go back up, pull the laptop up, and like kind of go through like my little, you know, ordeal. You know, not thinking about the impact it was having on my psychology, my mental health. Why was I struggling with so much anxiety? Why did I feel depressed all the time? All things now that I know were a byproduct of the porn use. You know, my journey to getting free started with meeting Vince Del Monte. You know, you mentioned you had Vince on the show. So in the end of 2016, I was running that ticket brokerage. We were doing pretty well, but it was nothing more than a cash grab for me at the time. I knew the industry. I had friends that kind of taught it to me. Said, well, here's an opportunity for me to make a lot of money, but no fulfillment at all. I'd been a bodybuilder. I'd had success in the fitness industry, and I was ready to get out of ticket brokerage and build something that was more of a passion of mine. So I found Vince online. I said, hey, you know, he wasn't running the mastermind that he has today, but he was doing some one-to-one coaching. So I hired him for 6 months of one-to-one coaching to launch my first fitness program. And at the end of that 6 month, if I had made a sale, I got a ticket to attend his 0 to 6 figure summit. This was July 2017. So I flew up to Toronto, and it's funny because I shared this with Vince this morning. I flew up to Toronto, you know, thinking I'm gonna, you know, learn some more business stuff, maybe learn Facebook ads, sales funnels, all that great stuff. And you know, he brought his dad up to speak on the first day. Anybody that knows Vince, I don't know if he shared it, but his father was a lifetime pastor. He was a pastor for 30 plus years. And there was, I remember it like it was yesterday, like the way that he spoke of his father, the respect that a grown man had towards his father was something that I never witnessed. And I said, there's something special there. Through that original mastermind, or through that original group, I ended up being one of the first members in Vince's 7-figure mastermind, which got me another year to be around him, got me a year to be in the group now. And Vince started connecting me with his friends that lived local to me. So these were all entrepreneurs, Christian guys, you know, in the fitness industry. So I started to spend time with these guys on a weekly basis. You know, we'd get together. One of the guys owned a gym in the area. We'd work out, and then workouts would turn into workouts and lunch, and then workouts and lunch would turn into workouts, lunch. Frank, hey, we want you to come and hang out with our family. And, you know, I'm sharing all this because it does lead me to freedom. But, once again, I thought I was learning business. I thought I was going to get some marketing hacks. I would learn how to build sales funnels and, maybe, throw some iron around with some cool dudes. What this led me to do, or what this ultimately led me to find, was my faith in God. So I didn't grow up, like you, I didn't have, Christian upbringing. We went to church maybe a handful of times, but it was always like during Easter or Christmas, it was rush and panic. And I can remember my parents fighting. And like, I think I just from a very young age identified as somebody that wasn't religious. I didn't have an understanding of who God was. I didn't know who Jesus. I saw what I perceived to be Christians, buttoned up, Ned Sanders, khakis and a sweatshirt. And I was like, well, that's not me. So I can't be a Christian. Maybe there's a God, but he probably doesn't want me because I'm broken. Like, I come from a family of addiction. I come from a family of suicide. So them over there are the Christians. We're the non-Christian people. Like, we're not God's people. And that was my identity from a very young age. But when I met guys like Vince and he introduced me to his friends, I'm like, these are real alpha dudes. Like, these are real strong men that actually lead with Christ first. And that was a separator for me. So spending 18 months around very strong, influential Christian men began to force me to ask questions about why, despite having success in business, why, despite having success in fitness, was I not being fulfilled? So on October 22nd, 2018, I did surrender my life to Christ. And this was really the beginning of the journey that I've been on for the last 6.5 years. Through that commitment, I tried to begin to walk in integrity, reading the Bible, begin to really unpack my life, cleaning out the closets, like, well, stop drinking over here. I got to start cleaning these areas of my life up as well. Through that process, I began to research porn and the impact it had on your brain. I stumbled across a YouTube video by Gary Wilson. He wrote Your Brain on Porn. And he shined such a light on the damaging effects of porn on your brain. And it really started to connect some dots for me. So February 14th of 2019, I ripped the Band-Aid off, and it was a series of events, but it started with truth. It started with me looking another grown man in the eyes and saying, dude, I'm struggling and I don't know what to do. Very fortunate to have amazing guys in my life that understood, that embraced it and say, dude, it's okay, man. Like, we all have struggled with this. So I went down this journey of, 4 or 5 months of getting free. I didn't know what it was going to lead to, but getting on the other side of my porn addiction literally changed the way that I saw the world. Like, I felt so much more connected with people. I felt a sense of drive and purpose, despite being somebody I thought was incredibly motivated. It was like this unlocked like a whole new level of motivation and passion inside of me. And as somebody, I see your bookshelf here. I mean, you have hundreds of books. Like, I'd read them all. I'd read at that point 500 books. I'd done the Tony Robbins seminars. Like, I'd always been chasing. But getting free from porn was actually like the missing link that I needed. And I kind of had this epiphany. Here I was 35 years old at the time. I had a little bit of a fitness following. But nobody back then, 2019, was talking about porn addiction. And I said, well, what happens if I start talking about this? What happens if I share how this is changing my life? Like, I'm sure it can benefit other people. Like, I thought I had everything figured out. I thought I knew all the personal development hacks. I obviously hadn't conquered and mastered fitness, but I still got caught up in an addiction. What about the guys that don't study personal development? What about the guys that don't have self-discipline? Like, do they even have the tools? So I kind of felt a call that it was almost a responsibility of mine to share what was going on in my life. And that led me to launching the Superhuman Life podcast in July of 2019. And at the time, Bridger, it was literally just a passion. I'm like, I want to have these conversations. I want to interview other people that have overcome obstacles in their life. I want to interview other people that have broke free from any addiction. Got pretty lucky that Apple picked up the podcast and put us on their front page, new and noteworthy. So the podcast gained some early traction. And the amazing thing that started to happen was, because like I said, I had a small fitness following at the time. So I was getting messages from guys that were going through our programs. Just be, Frank, thanks for the bicep tips, or, you helped me get 6-pack abs. Like, those were cool to get. But when I started to get messages from guys that were listening to the show, dude, thanks for opening up and talking about this. Like, thank you for your vulnerability. Like, it inspired me more to lean in even harder. 6-7 months into the podcast, like, those messages now begin to come in. Frank, I think I need help. Like, can you help me? And I was wrestling with it, because I didn't really feel qualified to walk anybody through an addiction. Like, yeah, I'd overcome it in my life. I was sharing things that were working for me on the podcast. But guys like Vince and the circle of friends that I had built over the last couple of years were like, Frank, there's an opportunity here. Like, God wouldn't have taken you through the journey that he did if he wasn't going to use you for something bigger. So January 2020. So we're free in February. Podcast launches in July. By January, the messages are flooding in. I mean, not dozens a week, but 4, 5, 6 messages on a weekly basis of guys seeking out for help. So I remember, putting a social media post. I'm looking for 5 guys, something that Vince had taught in one of his events. I'm looking for 5 guys that are struggling with this secret behavior. I'll coach you personally. No clue what I was going to do at the time, but I said, guys are telling me to try this. And I felt it was God's call for me. So January 28th, that post went out. By the end of that day, there were $6,000 new dollars in my bank account. And those were 2 guys that enrolled in what now has become the Reboot Your Life program. And I told these guys, I don't think I had this figured out, but if you're willing to trust in me, we'll do this together. So it was like daily calls with these guys. Like, you need to think about this, journal this. What are you feeling? And I was just really getting feedback from these guys. What's this journey like for you? I documented in journals, and I had some video documentation of things that I had done the year prior. But these guys, by the end of the 4 months, were clean and free. And it just wasn't that they were off of pornography. One of them was an incredibly successful business owner that went to the next level. Both of their relationships with their wives exploded. Their relationships with their kids through the roof. So it was like, okay, so it's not just about the quitting of the porn. It's like what that does and then improves every area of your life. So through those 4 months, I brought in a few other clients, and by July of 2020, it became kind of a full-time thing. It built it into a course and program now with videos. We had written some free ebooks, was now pumping out daily YouTube content. And that was kind of the genesis of Rebuilt Recovery. I say probably by July, August of 2020 is when it really became like a business. So that's what, a little over 4 years ago. And now, we're in the 3rd iteration of our program. It's been really enhanced, updated, and yeah, the rest has kind of been history.
Dude, so good. Yeah, let me plug this camera in. I think it's just dying. This one's still good though. We'll let this charge for a little bit. Dude, fire.
Yeah.
Wow. So, dude, that's a good story, dude. Dude, you just unloaded the whole story. I didn't even need to ask one question, man. Just, it was amazing. So talk to me about, some of the transformations you've had over the last 4 years. Cause we kind of left off where, you started with a couple guys, and now you got 1,200 people. Like, if we filled a room of 1,200 people, that's a lot of people. I mean, we were in a room 50 people. That's a decent amount. Like, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So what are some of the standout stories? And if you could, I understand the importance, especially if you have a wife and kids and stuff, but like, I'm thinking about this, and there might be other guys thinking about this. Oh, I'm single. I don't have a wife. I don't have a family. I'm young. I'm super high testosterone. I'm just a horny guy. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, what would you say to that person? And what are some of the stories, that you've heard of, like, the younger guys, how it's helped them?
Yeah, I mean, for the younger, I mean, we have an entire playlist on our YouTube channel of, we call it the I Am Rebuilt series, where we've interviewed guys. We had a video crew down in Tampa film a full kind of documentary style video.
Oh, wow.
Incredible. He was a Tampa sheriff that had been struggling. He married his high school sweetheart. They had 2 kids, both in high school. Daughter was a standout volleyball player. but completely disconnected from his wife, completely disconnected from who he really, really was. His wake-up call was his wife. He got home from work one day, and his wife showed him lease papers of a new apartment. And she said, if you don't change, I'm taking the kids and we're moving. So it's always a hard question when you ask, like, you know, the young guy out there that doesn't have a whole lot to lose. It's like, what's going to be the wake up call for you? Anybody out there that says it's not a problem? I had this conversation with a guy that opening night at the event. Anybody that believes it's not a problem, I challenge you to just go 30 days without it. And if you're resistant to even going 30 days without it, ask yourself, why are you so resistant to going 30 days without it?
What if I can do 30 days, but then after the 30, I go back to it or whatever? It's like, you know, what if it's like, yeah, it's not, what if someone's like indifferent to it? They're like, yeah, it's not a big deal. I guess what I mean is talk about the negative side effects, right? He doesn't have the family to lose, but what's he losing in his mind? Like walk me through, because I don't really know that much about like how it impacts the mind. You said there's a lot of negative side effects. I've seen books on it, but like paint me a really good picture. Cause I had a mentor, you know, tell me when I was like 19, he painted this really graphic story of his younger brother who got into drugs and alcohol. And then like the cartel came and freaking hunt him in his bedroom, got into the wrong crew. You never would have thought. And it was just like, here's the side effects of these drugs. And I'm just like, dude, I've never done drugs. I'm sober 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, so yeah, what are some of the, talk about the,
well, definitely we can talk about the harmful effects, but you know, it's never been my intent to tell anybody what they should or should not do with their life. And I think for me, that was one of the problems I saw in the church and why they're not addressing it, because they tell somebody they're a bad person if they look at it. It's not a good or bad conversation for me. I could care less what somebody does with their life. I'm here to help the ones that actually want to become the best version of themselves. And I believe you can't become that best version of yourself if you have this in your life to any degree. You ask the question, what does it do to the brain? All the research shows that it hijacks your dopamine reward pathway, unlike anything else in the world. And so what does that mean to somebody that doesn't understand hijacking the dopamine pathway? So dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It's a chemical that is released within your brain in two different ways. You can get it through the pursuit of pleasure. So use of pornography, gambling, drugs, alcohol, anything that is pleasure seeking is like hitting a button and it's a massive spike in dopamine. The
monkey brain.
Yeah.
Give me the bananas.
Yeah. 100%. Right. You know, they do the lab test with rats. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're good.
So in labs, they'll study rats, right? And they'll have a water bottle, and they'll have a water bottle that's laced with cocaine. And if you hit this lever, literally a rat will hit the lever till the point he kills himself. Like, because it's just a overstimulating of the brain. So you can hit the button over here and get dopamine from pleasure, or pleasure can come from the pursuit of reward. So if you set a goal, anything in your life, a small, meaningful goal that moves you closer towards the life that you want to build, you want to get in shape. So you set a goal of, I want to lose 15 pounds and build more muscle. Every small incremental step you take towards that goal will release a small drip of dopamine. Now, the interesting thing with dopamine, and Dr. Anna Lemke in Dopamine Nation does a really good job of highlighting this. Anna Lemke, she's Stanford's director of addiction. I had her on the podcast. She explains this cycle of dopamine. So if we think about dopamine as just there's a baseline level that we all have. So maybe it's a scale of 1 to 10. Our baseline is a 5 or 6. If we hit the dopamine pleasure button, it might shoot up to a 15. Maybe pursuing a goal like going to the gym takes us to an 8. But with dopamine, because it works in a cycle, with every spike, before it returns back to baseline, it's got to go in the opposite direction. So explaining this, so we're at a level 5. I hit the dopamine, I hit the porn button, I go up to 15. Before I return back to 5, I got to go to a negative 5. Now, what does that mean? Well, a spike creates sensation, creates stimulation, creates that like that feeling that you have when you're chasing pleasure. The pain that's experienced on the other side of that is the toxic thoughts, the loneliness, the depression, the isolation. So what happens with porn use is if you're hitting that button daily of chasing this pleasure, well, eventually you're going to reach a point where you feel completely unmotivated, completely depressed, completely isolated. Now that's one side effect, right? Is it hijacks the dopamine reward pathway. A second negative side effect that we probably speak to is what is actually occurring in the brain and what signals are firing. So in order for me to do anything, like my brain has to process. So this cup right here or this bottle that's sitting on it, if I'm going to pick that up, my brain needs to register that as an object, something that I can actually pick up. When I watch porn, the area of my brain that is being lit up is a part of your brain that's associated to objects. Now, when I see you in the real world, there's a completely different area of the brain that's lit up.
Emotional or something, right?
Emotional, connection, community.
Human,
right?
Yeah.
But if I'm training myself that when I see the human physique, I associate it to an object, what does that lead the male brain to do? Objectification. So a guy that's out there and says, oh, I just have a high sex drive, or I'm highly stimulated by beautiful women. Is that really how God designed you to be? Or is that a byproduct of you looking at pornography since you were 11, 12 years old? Now, we talked about the age of first exposure. Your parents were highly aware, right? 11 years old, we don't want to give you a cell phone. The male's brain isn't fully developed until you're 23 to 25 years old. So if you start looking at pornography at 12, 13, even 17 years old, you're literally developing those neural pathways in your brain of human object. When I'm stressed, the lever that I pull to de-stress myself is porn use and masturbation. That gets hardwired into your brain. Now you reach 27, 28 years old, and you're literally acting out pornography unconsciously because you have a decade plus of programming that into your brain. So those are some of the brain side effects, right? The average testosterone of a 20-year-old right now is equivalent to a 50-year-old in 1980. So there's a rapid decline in testosterone. The amount of men in their early 20s that are struggling with ED, erectile dysfunction, is through the roof. I mean, at 22, 23, 25 years old, like, you should have no problem getting an erection. But why are men struggling with ED at such a young age? Because their brains are literally overstimulated, desensitized. Like, so testosterone's down, ED is up, all a byproduct of the pornographic culture that we're living in. So those are, I mean, a few of the damaging side effects that I think if people were aware of and were actually educated on, would probably sway the way that they actually, or change the way that they actually look at porn use.
Dude, I love it. And I think this is so valuable to the audience, right? Because I think, like, if we don't know something, it's almost to our detriment. Like, we don't know it's hurting us. Like, you know, we don't know. We can't, like, associate that pain.
Yeah.
Because we don't feel it necessary. It might be a long-term pain, like a couple decades later. Now you have a wife and you objectify her or whatever. So I think it's so powerful. How do we get here as a society?
It's a big question.
Let it rip.
Should we put the tinfoil hats on for this one or what?
What's that?
Should we put the tinfoil hats on for this one? So I have a lot of opinions on this, and
Hear it, dude.
It's things that I really started to think about and pay attention probably 18 months ago. You know, you talked about it. I don't think you talked about it here, but we just obviously had an election. You have a Make America Great
100%
hat over there,
big
right?
Trump guy. What is it today? November, 3 days after the election.
3 days.
President-elect Donald J. Trump.
Yeah. So if you see the world probably similar to us, you would say that America has been in decline for a really, really long time. You know, has there been an agenda to weaken the young men of our society? In my opinion, 100%. There's a book written in the 40s called The Naked Communist. And in this book, they outlined 50 ways that they were planning on, and I say they, I'm talking about the Communist Party, they were going to take down America. And 2 of the top 20 steps that they were going to take in that book that they outlined were to make nudity basically common in society and make pornography accessible to the masses. You know, if you walk in public today, you walk into any gas station, any grocery store, any shopping mall, women are basically walking around in their underwear. nudity has become such a normalized, common thing in our society. Check for the communist. You know, the average age of exposure to pornography is 8 to 11 years old. You can go on Reddit, you can go on Twitter. You don't even need to go to a porn site these days.
It's horrible.
And it's ready there, right? Check for the communist. Pornography is made accessible to the masses. You know, so I believe that all of this has been a clear and decisive plan and agenda that's just played out over the last 70 to 80 years.
Yeah, and I agree 100% with what you're saying. In fact, you've watched the movie The Agenda?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I watched it with my parents, and I agree. You guys should watch it if you haven't. It's insane.
Yeah.
The evil behind the agenda
Yeah.
that the Communist Party has, and it truly is good versus evil. You even see some of the wars happening, Ukraine, Russia, right, and these different things happening in the world, and it's. I think, where I'm at and how I feel as a Gen Zer is like, dude, I've had enough. I'm pissed off, dude. I'm pissed off. All my followers are pissed off. Dude, we're done. Mm-hmm. We're drawing a line in the sand. We're stepping across it, and we're ready to become, what our grandparents were. Like, dude, I'm done, dude. I'm starting the biggest, greatest revolution in Jesus' name to make patriotism, to make family values, to make Christianity, to make God what our country was backed on again. And dude, we need to literally just bury this communist agenda because it clearly doesn't work. The stats are proven. It's a broken system. It's an evil system. And it's funny. I actually was talking to some of my friends. What are your thoughts on illegalizing pornography?
Illegalizing pornography. That's a tough one, right? Because now you're kind of stepping into, maybe what would be perceived as a First Amendment right. So would I love to see that happen? Absolutely, 100%. But I'm also a true American, a patriot that believes in freedom, that adults have the right to make choices. And they have the right to do essentially whatever they want. I mean, at the end of it, that is what freedom
that's true.
means. So while a part of me believes it's probably the only thing that would, I don't want to say save us, because I'm inspired by guys like yourself, and I'm inspired by what I've seen in Gen Z. So that's a tough one. I think it maybe needs to be regulated at a higher degree. I think there's got to be more barriers of access for it. But making it illegal, I think we're maybe kind of beginning to kind of step on people's rights.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I was just curious your perspective on it. I mean, they did the prohibition for a little while too, right? And then it almost made it like worse. It made it worse. It made it worse because you tell someone they can't do something. It's our rebellious nature, right?
Yeah.
But I like the regulation because I do think, it's an ass. So how do we combat this? How as men and as Gen Z and men watching this, how do we beat porn and how do we bankrupt the pornography industry?
Yeah. Vince shared a powerful quote. You weren't there yesterday. All transformation starts with truth. And like we have to just be honest about the evil behind this, about the drug that it actually is. And for the person that thinks that, oh yeah, it's just normal to watch porn and masturbate, is it? Like, is it really normal for a grown man to sneak away in privacy and secrecy, look at a screen to pleasure himself? There's nothing natural. That's not God's design for man. That's not God's design for sex. That's not God's design for relationships. So the truth and honesty piece has to be at the forefront of everything that we're going to be able to accomplish here. Until we actually are honest with ourselves and are honest with each other about the dangers of all this, we're never going to see any real change.
Have you seen guys that aren't men of faith get free of porn?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's been one really, and maybe not interesting, but I think that's one thing I've been able to do in the positioning of Rebuilt Recovery in the marketplace is, people know when they come into my world that Frank is a believer. Frank is a man of God. He's a man of faith. He is a Christian. But we don't position ourselves as a faith-based organization. We're built on a biblical foundation. We have, Bible studies within our course and curriculum. But I've had guys that have been true atheists that have found me and they feel comfortable in our space. I've had guys that have been Muslims that have found me and feel safe and comfortable in our place. Now, I do believe, and this is Jordan Peterson's language, that all recovery from addiction requires a spiritual transformation. Now, for me, I would pray that spiritual transformation for everybody would be finding Christ in their life and beginning to walk in that faith. But a spiritual transformation is a change in how you see the world, really. So even a agnostic, even an atheist has to go through some element of spiritual or identity transformation to truly walk in freedom. But yeah, we've had, probably 20% of the men in our program that wouldn't identify as Christians.
I love it, dude. So are you down to get into some of the nitty gritty?
Let's roll.
Dude, I want the 80.
Wait, we haven't gotten to the nitty gritty yet?
Dude, listen, we have gotten on the nitty gritty on the story, the negativities. Okay, we understand why it's here. It's here to destroy our country. It's here to destroy our dignity as men. It's here. It hijacks our dopamine system, so we can't be more productive. We can't go actually hunt and provide and be men and find an actual great wife. But I want to talk about what is, if that's the target, guy's watching this and he's inspired. He's like, dude, I see the pain. I see what you're saying, Frank. I agree. Give me the 80-20 on how this recovery and transformation can start. How can someone start to free themselves and walk in that path if they're watching this right now?
Yeah. And just to add on to one thing that you shared, I don't know if you've read Wild at Heart with John Eldredge. Incredible book. Every believer out there, every Christian man or a man that calls himself a Christian should read it. But in the book, John Eldredge talks about the three desires that all men have on their heart. And it is the desire to fight. So to fight a battle. So something that we want to conquer in this world. For you, it's helping Generation Z. The desire to go on an adventure. So the adventure of life, right? We're all on this kind of hero's journey, and the desire to rescue a beauty. Now, pornography will solve that problem for men, right? You have unlimited access to, an 11-year-old boy can go on the internet right now and in the span of 15 minutes see more naked women than a king, sultan, world ruler could have done in his entire lifetime just 100 years ago. So that's been hijacked by pornography. Now, the adventure and battle, I think video games are hijacking that in most young men, right? So just kind of tying a bow on what it's doing to young men.
Amen.
Yeah. Getting into the nitty gritty, right? I already touched on it, right? All transformation starts with truth.
I like
so you
that.
have to be honest. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to look yourself in the mirror.
Truth sets you free.
Jesus said it.
Scripture.
Yeah. So for me, that started, right? I looked in the mirror and I said, Frank, you're trying to build this business. You're trying to, help inspire the world. You're trying to help men become the best version of themselves through fitness, but you're not even the best version of yourself. Like, I had to get radically honest with myself first. And then once a guy does that, I would say the next step is to find the person in your life that you're going to open up with. You're not going to overcome this on your own. Like, you can believe that you're going to do it, but trust me, after talking with thousands of men and working with over 1,200 men, like, you will not conquer this on your own. So you have to find a person in your life that you can have a real, open, honest conversation in a safe place, absent of guilt or judgment. Now, that could be your father. It probably won't be for many men. It could be a mentor. It could be yourself, for the audience out there. It could be a pastor. It could be anybody. But you got to find somebody that you are just radically honest with from the get-go. And then from there, it is understanding that you're not trying to control this behavior. You're trying to understand what this behavior is solving in your life, right? So I always tell guys, like, you think porn's your problem, but it's not. Porn has become the solution to the other problems in your life. And until you figure out how to solve and address those other problems, porn will always be the best option for you. Because if you feel alone, porn's going to make you feel connected for a short window, right? It is a good at solving that problem. If you feel stressed, it is great at making you feel less stressed. So unless you can identify what would be called maybe the root of these issues, you're always going to struggle. So it's not behavioral management. It's not quitting porn. It's figuring out what porn is solving in your life and how do I better solve those problems. A lot of it is going to be nervous system regulation. So porn is great at taking you from a fight or flight into a rest and digest, right? So our nervous system gets in this autonomic arousal, like elevated heart rate. we start feeling, you know, anxious, excited. Porn is great at bringing us down. There's a lot of other great tools to do that, though.
What are a couple?
Well, breathing is one of the best ones, right? You know, Wim Hof breathing. Say for a lot of people, it's removal of your environment. Like if you're sitting at your work desk and like you're just getting panicked about like you're working on a project and you're just feeling resistance, well, porn can make you feel less relieved. Going outside, breathing in some fresh air. Sometimes just connecting with somebody. Like call your boy up. Hey, what's going on, man? Just checking in, dude. How you doing? You know, I'm feeling a little stressed right now. And that's where it's like having community is so crucial, so key. And we walk guys through like a literal identity transformation. So we want to help you understand how porn has negatively impacted you, and let's build the life where that porn is no longer needed. So our course and program is designed, like I said, to walk you through that identity transformation.
Man, if you're not wanting to work with Frank after this, man, I don't know what to tell you, but I'm ready to freaking sign up right now, dude. I'm closed, dude. I'm fired up. This is some good stuff, man. Because you know what I like a lot about this is, you know, I've heard a lot of people talk about it and the science and all the mumbo jumbo, but they don't talk about it the way you do, which is like porn is the solution, not the problem. And if you solve these problems, like how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you're showing up and you're putting Band-Aids on for this problem with porn, you're probably doing it with your business.
Yeah.
You're probably doing it with these other areas.
Yeah.
And if you go and you attack that, not only does this become absent, but then all these other problems, which I think is what you're sharing through your transformations. And I think you see it, and that's why you find the fulfillment in it.
Yeah.
Dude, that's so powerful, man.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, man. If someone's watching this and they want to get connected, they want to learn more about what you do with the Rebuilt Recovery, where can they find you? How can they plug in?
Yeah, I mean, just search Coach Frank Rich anywhere on the internet, right? You know, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Coach Frank Rich. We're everywhere. Rebuiltrecovery.com will give you information on the company and the coaching that we do. We recently launched a school community, so we do have a free school community. So if you search the Rebuilt Man on school, we have resources. We have an entire community of men that are all, you know, chasing freedom together. So any of those places would be the best place to connect with us.
Dude, I love it, man.
Yeah.
And my final question to you is this. Porn is often the solution, right? And at the heart, there's probably some pain that you find a lot of men heal through. And do you find that by addressing the root issue, it also solves the problem of lust? Because I've had seasons in my life where I'm not watching porn, but I'm sleeping with women, right? Or I'm going out and I'm, you know, whatever, right? So, yeah, you want to speak on that for a minute?
Yeah. One of the most powerful books that changed my life back in 2018 was written by Michael John Cusick, Surfing for God. And it was a required reading within our program. Now it's more of a recommended.
What's it called?
Surfing for God.
Like surfing?
Surfing.
Like surfing.
Well, surfing.
Oh, surfing.
Internet
Got
surfing,
it,
right?
got it,
So Michael shares a quote from G.K. Chesterton. G.K. Chesterton was a Christian philosopher. He's a spy in the late 1800s. And he has this famous quote that when a guy knocks on a brothel door, he's knocking for God. So Michael took that quote and then created Surfing for God. So it's like the modern version of the brothel is the internet porn. So if a guy's knocking on a brothel door, searching for God, when you were chasing women, you were trying to fill the hole in your heart that only God can fill. When a guy's going on the internet, he's got to understand that he's chasing something externally that can only be filled by the man upstairs. So until you, I believe, are walking in alignment with the man that God has called you to be, you'll have this perceived struggle with lust. In reality, you have a perceived struggle with walking in integrity with who God has called you to be.
So good. Thank you, man, for being generous with your time, coming on, sharing your knowledge, sharing your wisdom, being real. You know, I think more men should embrace reality. And like you said, transformation starts with truth. And I think the more real we can be with ourselves and others, the more transformation we can embrace in our lives. And, you know, in Romans talks about do not be conformed to this world. Don't justify it. Don't justify everyone else watching porn. Set a new standard. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that's what I think you're as I see you empowering people to do that. So I want to commend you for that. Thank you for that. And I'm very grateful to have you on the show, brother.
Yeah. Thank you, brother. Honored to be here.